The icy grip of the spring thaw in 1924 revealed a chilling secret beneath the frozen surface of Little Lava Lake, nestled near the Cascade Mountains west of Bend, Oregon. The frigid waters cradled with frozen bodies of 3 fur trappers, missing for weeks after vanishing from their woodland cabin. Hi folks, I'm Johnny and welcome to The Oddest. This is a captivating, cold-blooded mystery and it remains unsolved for nearly a century. A gruesome tale of murder, shrouded in a mysterious motive and an elusive killer. For 2 gruelling weeks, the freezing cold of winter had a tight grip, making it super tough for Owen Morris and his buddy to move forward. The whole place was covered in thick snow layers, and there was no break until up ahead they finally spotted where they were headed. It was a lonely wooden cabin on the edge of this big creepy forest that seemed to go on forever. As Owen and his friend dragged themselves towards this cabin, a weird feeling of dread took over. The snow around was pure and undisturbed, showing no signs that anyone lived there. They also noticed that the chimney had no smoke coming from it. This made their hearts heavy and dashed any hopes of finding anyone inside. For Owen Morris, this whole journey felt like diving into some seriously scary stuff. It had been more than 3 months since he last heard from his little brother and his 2 trapping buddies, who were staying at this far-off cabin. There was no recent messages or anything hinted at what was going on here, and that scared everyone back home in Bend. Approaching the cabin, Morris carefully pushed open the front door, gun ready, and gave his buddy the signal to do the same. The air inside felt thick with tension. The reality hitting them was as harsh as the freezing winter that they just went through. The guy with Owen Morris was called Pearl Linz, and he was the superintendent of the Tumalo Fish Hatchery. And although he did have access to a gun, he never had any cause to certainly pull it out, until now. Inside the cabin it was like a gloomy scene. Hunting gear and weapons was just simply left there. The leftovers of a breakfast clung to the pan on the stove, where the fire had died out long ago. Papers and debris scattered the floor, and in the corner there was a skinny dead cat, which just made things a wee bit more unsettling. Morris, his grip tightening on his revolver, felt a surge of sorrow and anger. He turned quickly and exited the cabin. His idea was to check all the nearby traps and lines, each revealing the frozen remnants of animals that had been caught in them and died months ago. It all made no sense. There was just no way that the hunters would have all left the cabin and not taken their rifles with them. As Owen inspected the rest of the traps, his mind racing with what possibly could have happened here, his silent thoughts were shattered when he heard a blood-curdling cry from his companion Linz. A small holding pen built to contain foxes at the rear of the cabin held a ghastly secret. A discarded wooden pallet covered in blood. As winter descended upon Bend, 3 locals, Edward Nichols, a 50-year-old caretaker, Roy Wilson, a 35-year-old Marine Corps veteran, and the youngest being 25-year-old Dewey Morris, well, they embarked on a journey to an isolated cabin in the Deschutes National Forest near Little Lava Lake. Their aim? Well, it was to spend the winter months trapping fur in the unforgiving wilderness. They just figured that it was a good way of making some serious cash for them and their families. Eddie Logan, a local logging contractor, had spun a tempting offer for the eager 25-year-old Dewey Morris, revealing ownership of a secluded cabin near the icy shores of Little Lava Lake. Desperate and unemployed, Dewey just couldn't resist the allure of trapping in the wilds during the Christmas season, envisioning the lucrative pelts from the neighbouring Deschutes National Forest that could line his pockets with some cash. Thus began his venture into the wilderness alongside 2 of his local friends, Edward Nichols and Roy Wilson. Just days before Christmas, the 3 men briefly returned back to Bend with the animal skins that they had gotten from their traps. Even after handing over the majority of their haul to Eddie Logan, they were left with a handsome profit as Logan paid them well. Morris, fueled by the promise of a joyful reunion with his family and a night of revelry, well, he set his sights on spending his hard-earned bounty before returning to the cabin with Nichols and Wilson for another stint and the promise of yet another lucrative payday. On the 15th of January, the group were seen for the last time by a local resort owner called Alan Wilcoxon. He had stopped by in on the cabin on his way back to Bend. He reported back that all was well and the three lads were in high spirits. However, by early April, silence had enveloped the once jovial trio. Concerned, Eddie Logan enlisted the help of Dewey's older brother, Owen Morris, and his friend Peril Linz to go and check on the missing trappers. What they discovered at that cabin, after a challenging journey through the snow-covered wilderness, well, it shook them to their core. Horrified, they hurried back to town and report their disturbing findings to the local sheriff, prompting the immediate assembly of a full search party, which was led by Deputy Sheriff Clarence Adams. As the search party, comprised of trackers and seasoned game hunters, approached the cabin, dread thickened the air. Following Adams, they reached Little Lava Lake, where a wooden object emerged from the snow. They found a heavy wooden sled that was used by the three trappers, its rear panel stained with what seemed to be blood. Pressing forward, they found a frozen hole in the lake's surface. This hole could possibly have been cut for fishing, but in the time since, it had frozen over. Just a short distance away, under a nearby tree, lay the gruesome remnants of a fox's body, believed to be one of the foxes that would have been kept at the cabin, and a torn, bloodied scalp showing dark hair as well as several human teeth. Despite their familiarity with the harsh environment, this grisly scene unnerved even the most hardened searchers. The sheriff rallied his team, directing them to break the ice around this frozen hole. It wasn't long before the bodies of the missing men were discovered beneath the ice in the frozen lake, their lifeless bodies displaying wounds inflicted by both gun and hammer. All three bodies displayed injuries conducive with being battered with a hammer before and after death. Roy Wilson's right shoulder had been hollowed out by a shotgun, the fatal shot carried out by a pistol fired into the back of his head. Dewey Morris had suffered a shattered left arm and a fatal shot to the back of his head also. Edward Nichols was missing his jaw completely, believed to have been the result of a close-quarters shotgun blast. He was still wearing his reading glasses, and a pocket watch within his jacket had stopped frozen at 9:10 AM. This evidence, coupled with the remnants of an uninterrupted breakfast found back at the cabin, painted a chilling narrative. It suggested that the three trappers had been cunningly lured outside, only to meet their demise in cold blood shortly after waking one fateful morning. Deputy Sheriff Adams couldn't shake the grim realisation that the victims had been utterly defenceless against this attack. As he witnessed the bodies being loaded onto sleds for the sombre journey back to town, Adams grappled with the motive behind this savage and senseless murders. The personal effects of the deceased remained intact, and valuable pelts were left untouched at the crime scene. The perplexing question was still lingering: what could drive someone to commit such an atrocious act? Initially, suspicion centred on a local woodsman and moonshiner known as Indian Erickson, residing by Cultus Lake. Erickson, with a history of troublemaking, seemed a likely suspect for a robbery gone awry. However, the case against him, well, it quickly crumbled because witnesses provided substantial alibis. It was Eddie Logan who stepped forward with a new lead, pointing the finger at a rival trapper called Lee Collins. Logan claimed that Collins had a history of stealing from traps laid by Logan's employees. Adding fuel to the fire, there was a brewing conflict between Collins and the late Nichols, who had caught Collins once trying to steal his wallet in a bar. Deputy Sheriff Adams delved into Logan's suspicions, uncovering a convoluted reality. See, he discovered that this Lee Collins guy was a convicted criminal called Charles Kimsey, and that he was wanted in connection with an attempted murder back in 1923. He had assaulted a stagecoach driver named W.O. Harrison, nearly choking him to death and then hurling him down a well. Harrison miraculously survived this assault and identified Kimsey, who had fled into the wilderness before authorities could even apprehend him. News of Kimsey's potential involvement in the trapper slayings reached the national stage, prompting a swift response from the Portland City Police Department. A week after the victims were last seen, Kimsey encountered a traffic officer. He had asked the officer where he might find a fur dealer. Deputy Sheriff Adams hurried to Portland, questioning all the fur dealers that he could. The breakthrough came when Kyle Schumacher of the Schumacher Fur Company revealed that he had purchased high-value pelts from a man who signed a receipt with the name and trapper's licence of Eddie Nichols. Well, that's dodgy for a start. Frustratingly, the police faced a protracted struggle to track down this elusive fugitive. Reports poured in from various corners, suggesting sightings of Charles Kimsey in 2 different states at the exact same time. It wasn't until 5 years later that he was finally located, holed up in the town of Kalispell in the neighbouring Montana. Charged with this triple murder, Kimsey found himself behind bars awaiting trial. However, the case against him unravelled in court. Despite the overwhelming evidence, including eyewitness accounts and alibi witnesses placing him in Colorado during the murders, the 2 main witnesses failed to identify Kimsey from a lineup. However, W.O. Harrison, the man Kimsey had attempted to kill back in 1923, well, he was able to positively identify him. So, Kimsey was convicted of the robbery and attempted murder of that man, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment. Despite protests of innocence, he passed away within the confines of the Oregon State Penitentiary. The Deschutes County Sheriff's Office, though convinced of Kimsey's guilt, closed the case with no other suspects identified. The notion that one man alone could overpower and kill 3 robust hunters raised some eyebrows. The use of at least 3 different weapons suggested the involvement of multiple assailants. Why would Kimsey, already a wanted man for attempted murder, go to the trouble of transporting the bodies through the snow to Little Lava Lake? Why bother cutting a hole in the ice to conceal their bodies at all? In recent years, a familial link between Charles Kimsey and a guy called Roy Van Buren Jackson emerged. Jackson, a local school teacher, had long been suspected of involvement in the deaths of at least 6 residents during the early 1900s. While never charged with these crimes, he had direct links to all 6 of these deceased individuals. The savage nature of the Lava Lake murders, reminiscent of the Villisca Axe murders, hinted at a possible connection to a serial killer, or killers. The passage of time has cast a shadow over the chances of ever solving this mystery. The prevailing hypothesis points at Kimsey as the likely killer, saved from conviction perhaps by a significant change in his appearance. Yet the manner of the killings and the potential links to another suspected serial killer raise unsettling questions. As the answers remain elusive, the hope endures that by sharing this story, someone may someday attempt to unveil the truth behind this tragic and senseless crime. That's it for this video, folks. I hope you're all doing well and staying safe. Please tell someone that you love them, and remember, no matter how bad things get, keep smiling.